A few months ago, I was having breakfast with another retired foreigner here in Indonesia. We had never met before. He pulled up a chair beside me, smiled, and asked a question that caught me completely off guard. "So, what made you leave the other places and end up here?" For a moment, I just laughed, because the answer wasn't simple. If you had asked me 6 years ago where I planned to spend my retirement, Indonesia wouldn't even have made my list. Like so many people, I dreamed about the countries everyone talks about: Thailand, Malaysia, the Philippines. Those names came up in every YouTube video, every retirement blog, every Facebook group where retirees debated which country offered the best value. Indonesia was barely mentioned. When it was, most people only talked about Bali. They assumed it was crowded, expensive, or only good for short vacations. I believed the same thing. But life has a funny way of proving our assumptions wrong. Today, at 68 years old, I wake up in Indonesia feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Not excitement, not luxury, not even adventure, just peace. And after meeting dozens of retirees from Europe, America, Australia, and Canada over the past few years, I've realized something. Many of them didn't come here because they were chasing the cheapest lifestyle. They came because they were searching for something they couldn't quite explain. Oddly enough, I think I was searching for the very same thing. Before moving overseas, my life had become incredibly small. I spent nearly 40 years working as an accountant in Birmingham. Numbers had always made sense to me. If something didn't add up, there was usually an explanation. Retirement was different. No spreadsheet could explain the silence that filled my home after my husband passed away 4 years earlier. We had shared that little brick house for more than 4 decades. Suddenly it felt far too large for one person. My son had built a life in Canada, while my daughter was raising 2 wonderful children in Australia. They called every week and reminded me that I could move closer to them if I wanted. But I didn't want to interrupt the lives they had worked so hard to build. So whenever they asked how I was doing, I smiled and gave the same answer: "I'm doing just fine." The truth was much quieter. Some afternoons, the only conversation I had was with the cashier at the supermarket. I wasn't looking for excitement anymore. I simply wanted to wake up somewhere that didn't remind me every single day of what I'd lost. Over the following year, I visited several countries across Southeast Asia. Every place had something wonderful to offer. Thailand felt energetic. Malaysia felt modern. The Philippines felt welcoming. Each destination gave me another reason to stay. Yet each time I boarded my flight home, something felt unfinished. I couldn't explain it. Nothing was actually wrong. The apartments were comfortable. The restaurants were excellent. The hospitals looked impressive. Public transportation was often better than what I had back home. On paper, everything seemed perfect. But whenever I imagined living there permanently, I couldn't picture my life beyond the apartment walls. I imagined grocery shopping, paying bills, walking the same streets every day, and somehow I still saw myself living as an outsider. Then a retired Australian I met during one of my trips asked me something unexpected. "Are you looking for a country, or are you looking for a life?" That question followed me everywhere. It stayed with me on flights, in hotel rooms, even back home in England. Eventually, curiosity led me to Indonesia. To be honest, I didn't arrive with high expectations. I thought I'd spend a couple of weeks, look around, then continue my search somewhere else. Instead, Indonesia quietly challenged almost everything I thought retirement was supposed to be. My first month wasn't particularly easy. There were moments when I questioned my decision almost every day. The weather felt hotter than I expected. Traffic seemed completely unpredictable. Simple errands often took much longer than they should have. I struggled with the language. Sometimes I accidentally ordered food I couldn't even recognize. Other days I smiled politely, without understanding a single word someone had just said to me. There were evenings when I returned to my rented house feeling exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. Starting over at 68 wasn't nearly as romantic as social media made it look. One afternoon, I sat alone outside a small neighborhood cafe, wondering if I'd made another mistake. I wasn't looking at my phone. I wasn't reading. I was simply sitting there. A middle-aged Indonesian woman who owned the cafe noticed me. She walked over with a fresh cup of tea. I reached for my wallet. She gently shook her head. "No, welcome." Those 2 words stayed with me. The next day I came back. She remembered my name. A week later she introduced me to her husband, then to her sister, then to neighbors who stopped by every morning before work. Nobody asked what I owned. Nobody cared how much pension I received. Nobody treated me like a tourist they needed to impress. Instead, they included me in ordinary moments. One morning, I was invited to join a birthday breakfast for a neighbor's grandson. Another afternoon, someone insisted I take home fresh bananas from their garden. During a local celebration, families encouraged me to sit beside them even though I barely understood the conversations. Children laughed as they patiently corrected my pronunciation whenever I tried speaking Indonesian. Little by little, familiar faces replaced unfamiliar streets. The vegetable seller started putting aside my favorite tomatoes because she knew I'd arrive every Tuesday. The gentleman who repaired bicycles greeted me every morning with the same cheerful smile, even when I wasn't his customer. The security guard outside the neighborhood convenience store eventually stopped asking where I was from. Instead, he'd simply wave and ask if I'd already had breakfast. Those moments weren't dramatic. None of them would ever appear in a travel brochure. But together, they slowly changed how I felt. For the first time since losing my husband, I stopped counting the days. I started living them. People often assume foreigners are leaving popular retirement destinations because they're looking for somewhere cheaper. I used to believe that too. But after living here, I think the real answer is much simpler. As we grow older, our priorities quietly change. We stop chasing bigger houses. We stop worrying about impressing anyone. We begin looking for smaller things that somehow matter much more. A familiar smile. Someone who notices when you haven't stopped by for coffee. Neighbors who greet you by your name instead of calling you the foreign lady. Indonesia gave me those moments almost without trying. My home is smaller now. My wardrobe is simpler. I cook fewer meals than I used to. Yet my life feels fuller than it has in years. Looking back, I don't think people are quietly choosing Indonesia because it's perfect. They choose it because life here still leaves room for human connection. And at 68 years old, after losing the person I expected to grow old with, I discovered something that took me an entire lifetime to understand. Home isn't where you've lived the longest. It isn't where your passport was issued. It isn't where your pension stretches the furthest. Home is the place where people make you feel that your story isn't over yet. I came to Indonesia thinking I was beginning my retirement. Instead, I found the courage to begin living again.